Friends, welcome to the Ransomed Heart podcast here in a unique moment, just out of Christmas proper, but not out of Christmas tide, I'd like to point out.
Well said, John.
Thanks. And, hovering on the edge of the new year, depending on when you pick this podcast up this week, it may be the new year. So I guess we need to say Happy New Year.
Right.
To our listeners. And want to be kind to your souls this week and offer kind of two parts. I want to think about coming out of the holidays and then think about going into the new year, but not cram that into one thing, because I think that's the brutal part of the world that, okay, that's done. Now get going.
Yes.
It's the new year, new you. What do you got? What are your resolutions? What do you got? What's your plans?
Right, you're refreshed. You had a holiday. Everything's great. Let's
go.
Focus.
Right. So that feels unkind. So coming out of Christmas with all the highs and lows of that, and I hope some beauty, no doubt some disappointment, just to kind of go, hang on. Before we rush into the new year, how's your soul? How's your heart? How's your life? How have you had a chance to process Christmas at all? And Morgan, you knew we were coming into this podcast. What loving counsel would you give friends coming out of the holidays before they jump into the new year? Like what do they need to think about?
Yeah, John, before making that transition into the new year, I think as I look back over the years in this kind of repeated liturgy of time, I would say that the beautiful trend for me is there's been less and less pressure, self-imposed pressure, and therefore disappointment of unmet expectations.
Less disappointment?
Less disappointment. In other words,
less pressure.
Exactly. Where historically, I'd go in kind of superhero mentality as husband and as father, as friend. And even if I came through in most instances, you end up feeling this kind of unnamed sense of failure, in a sense of I didn't meet all the expectations. Oh, what I could have done, what I should have done for my kids. And, it's just, it just doesn't produce the fruit. I remember one mentor in this, he said, I used to be hard on myself. And over the decades, what I've learned is, one, it's simply not that fruitful. And secondly, I just don't have the energy to waste on being hard on myself. And so I think in some ways, John, as I reflect on it, I'm really hopeful and I'm grateful that, like your counsel you brought up in a podcast in the past, is blessing the partial. And so as I look back, I go, I have to ask God, what was the partial that you brought? What was the piece of goodness? Help me hear from you on what you accomplished with my participation in the holidays. And so, yes, of course, there's always undone and there's always loss or misses or what could have or should have. But I'm learning to cultivate the practice of asking, Father, what do you want to say about that?
Yeah.
What did we learn together? What did you do? What do we celebrate? And then from that place, letting go, right? Then it's releasing of, okay, I give everyone and everything to you as you've counseled us. And I don't mean that inspirationally. Like, it's an actual spiritual activity that shifts the heavens, right? And it's just a releasing to not carry it.
Yeah, that's really good. Friends, I want to encourage that kind of reflection in your week, because everything around you has probably already switched gears. I'm thinking of people. So our tree died this year. It just died.
It was so beautiful. Come on.
It died. And it was a cut down in the forestry. And I don't know if I just missed some water cycles or something. I thought I watered it, but it died so badly that this year we had to get it out of the house after Christmas. But as a rule, I don't recommend that. Like, don't just take down all the decorations and that's that and we're moving on. You know, the Feast of Epiphany is January 6th, and that is a significant part of Christmastide, the arrival of the Magi to Christ and his parents. And, you know, so in a kingdom sense, not over, folks.
Yep.
The world wants you to shift, but I want to read something out of, I think some of you know I have a new book coming out in February called Get Your Life Back, Everyday Practices for a World Gone Mad. I want to read something to you out of the chapter on transitions. I think it was Archibald Hart who pointed out that because we are so accustomed to moving pedal to the metal in our own world, the thing we overlook in the Gospels are all of the in-between times when Christ and his followers were walking from one town to another. When the record states, quote, the next day, Jesus decided to leave for Galilee, John 1:43, we project our own pace upon it, not realizing it took the boys 3 days by foot to get there. 3 days. Just strolling along, talking or sharing the silent beauty, the pauses for lunch or a drink from a well, the campfires in the evening. Even as I write this, it sounds luxurious. Christ does not move immediately from one dramatic story to another. There was downtime, transition time between those demands, time to process what had happened. These are the moments, by the way, you see the disciples asking questions. What did you mean by? Time to catch their breath before the next encounter. That was the pace Jesus felt was reasonable for people engaged in important things and wanting a life with God. Time we would categorize almost as vacation time. For those are the only periods we allow ourselves a stroll, a lingering lunch, a campfire conversation. We highly progressive moderns try to keep up without any of those intervals and transitions. The things that we require of ourselves. We go from a tender conversation with our 8-year-old, anxious about going to school, to an angry phone call with our insurance company as we drive to work, followed by a quick chat with our sister needing a decision about our aging parents' memory care unit. Then it's straight into a series of business meetings, during which we multitask by trying to bang out some email, firing an employee, interviewing another, making dinner reservations for our spouse's birthday, fitting in a conversation with our boss because we can't say no, and showing up late and haggard for the dinner. And we wonder why we have a hard time finding God, receiving more of Him, feeling like we're overflowing with life. We are forcing our souls through multiple gear changes each day, each hour, and after years of this, we wonder why we aren't even sure what to say when a friend genuinely inquires, "How are you?" We don't really know. We aren't sure what we feel anymore. We live at one speed, go. All the subtleties of human experience have been forced into one state of being. Mercy. No soul was meant to live like this.
Oh, it's true. It's convicting. John, as I listen,
Your body language is relaxed.
part of me goes, were that it were so, right? Like, because here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I'm thinking as you're reading that. Retail is just devious in its ability to churn the next thing, right?
Yes.
Retail culture, you inevitably find yourself going in stores, and we go in stores less and less. But like January, it's flooded with the containers, right? Organize your crap.
Yes.
And now that you have so much more crap,
Yes.
get a hold on it, organize it, right?
Right.
Or get on a diet for all
The
the
diet
overeating,
plans,
right?
the gym
It's
memberships.
so the
yeah.
culture we're in is almost demanding. And when I say almost demanding is like, we have agency. We can do something about that. And so I'm listening, and I have different reactions, but I guess this is the question. John, as I hear that. Like, so what are some examples? What would you say are some practical examples of transitions, as you've just beautifully described, related to this season, to protect the treasures and not give way to simply that madness?
Let's put it in the context of, what are you doing to care for your soul this week? In the week between Christmas and New Year's. Are you just blasting again? Are you just back at it? Is it over and done and now let's go? Because that wouldn't be a good choice.
Yep.
So what are you doing? And then we can get really fun and playful with this. Keep listening to Christmas carols. Christmas carols are phenomenal. The theology in songs like God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen is right on and really great reminders. And so, like, keep the decorations up. Keep listening to Christmas carols. Now is the time to actually enjoy some reflection on. That is an amazing thing that God became human. What? Like, wow, what a plan, Lord. And,
Yep.
So reflection,
Yep.
pace would be another. Really? Do you really need to pack the house up? Now, some of you may have to, or you're traveling back home now, and I get that. But really, what are you asking of yourself this week, right? Yeah. And then where we began, the podcast today was, so how was Christmas? Have you asked yourself? What was it like? What was good? What was hard? Because the idea of walking from one town to another, right? We just think it's boom, boom, boom. Jesus kicks out this demon. Jesus heals this person. Jesus gives that message. You go, no, actually, there were 7 days in between those two events.
Yes.
There were 2 weeks in between those two events. I mean, it's just, what? All this time to reflect on the story.
Yes.
And so are you reflecting on your story?
It's so good, John, because the scriptures were written at a time, we have to remember, that assumed a soul's pace.
Yeah.
It was a walking culture. It was a non-technology centered culture. And we just skip over that. But you're right. I think, as you say that, I think of some really practical things for us. And I have to think like bite-sized. What's accessible? And simple thing that started this year, we've never done before, but Sherry has had us singing one Christmas carol before we eat dinner when we sit around.
Oh, I love
now,
that.
Now, please understand, it's not like magical family dinner. The kids were studying for finals, and one kid's not there because she has basketball practice, right? But when we are able to, it's just one song.
Yeah.
Just one time. We've got a fantastic Christmas book called The Indescribable Gift. I've been reading it for 20 years. And each chapter features a different person in the narrative of Christmas. And it makes the scriptures come alive. So these stories that have become so familiar, they become innocuous. It's a way of returning to the treasure that is the invasion of the kingdom. And we found times to sit and just read several pages. This morning I was on a date with Abigail and we're at Einstein's and we just had time to read 3 pages of a story. And it was just like smelling salts to get us back. And so I've learned, and I'm learning, that it's in the bite size to capture the transitions, to sink in, to settle in and savor, if only for moments, because they add up.
Allow for transitions. You sat in a coffee shop with your daughter and read a book? Okay, 2 reactions to that. First is, I can't remember the last time I sat in a coffee shop and read a book for pleasure. And then, how unrealistic that sounds.
Yes.
When you go, no, that's actually just a soulful life. That is a reasonable way to live.
Yeah.
What we assume to be normal life is an unreasonable way to live.
Yes.
And so, coming into Christmas, we did a couple lighter podcasts, shorter podcasts, to just recognize, we know you're busy. We know it's crazy. You don't need a long, in-depth Bible study into, who was Quirinius and why was there a census being called. You don't need that.
I would like to hear about that at some point, though.
June. I'll tell you about it in June. So the idea is kindness here. We're in a transition moment between Christmas and New Year's and the kicking off of the new year and all the expectations around that. What are you doing to take care of yourself? Now, having said that, we also want to give you a piece of counsel that we give our listeners every year at this time of year. And it is the idea of before the new year is too far upon you, before the momentum has seized everything, consecrate your year to Jesus. Consecrate as we, one of the transitional things Stace and I'll do, and we did it when we had children in the house. We don't anymore, but we'll do it together. It's really rich is we will look at the calendar and think about the year and go, oh my gosh, this was the year. Well, this is the year that we got the puppy, or what, this was the year that you survived that automobile accident. Oh my gosh, this was the year Stacy had a hip replacement. And oh my goodness, thank you, God. And reflect on your year and then consecrate your new year. And for me, even one of those transition pieces was, I'm ready to rip down the 1-year wall calendar that we keep inside a door so we can get a quick look at, wait, when's your mom coming? And, big things. I'm ready to just rip it down. But instead, what I need to do is pause, look at 2019, reflect on it, and then replace it with the 2020 calendar.
Yes.
Now, having said that, first thing we do when the 2020 calendar goes up, that we've made a practice over the years and we highly recommend to you folks, is consecrate your year to Jesus. Dedicate it to the Lord. Like literally, Jesus, we consecrate 2020 in our household and in our domain to you. And then get real specific, like we consecrate our days. We consecrate our weekends. We consecrate our family's pace. We consecrate whether we take vacation this year. And when that happens, we let you be Lord of our calendar. And we'll invite that. Jesus, please come and be Lord of our calendar.
Yeah, and I think it's helpful to say we do it corporately and personally. So like you're kind of giving visibility on a family level, but we do it corporately as Ransom Heart team, right? At some point, and sometimes it happens a little later because there's things going on and schedules, but whatever else we do, we make it a point to consecrate. We consecrate as families and then personally, right? That's such an important piece and something that grows in value for me with every passing year is my own intimate walk with God, to reflect on the year. Jesus, what do you want to say about this past year? Shine your light, give me visibility to what I need to hold on to, what I need to celebrate, where I need to do some honest repenting, to inform me in love for where you want to lead me. And what are the words? What is your counsel? Help me see clearly. I see things not as they truly are, but as I am. And so I confess I need your help in shaping my seeing. And so, yeah, it's absolutely essential. And I think with compassion and kindness, I want to say it's essential. And now, how does that apply to you, right? You have to find a way. If you have little kids, you're not talking about a family retreat day where you sit around circled necessarily, right? Some years it's pretty bumpy.
Yeah.
But whatever is in your power, it is absolutely essential.
Consecrate your year. We consecrate 2020 in our family. We consecrate 2020 at work. We consecrate 2020 in joy. We consecrate it in mission. Like Jesus, come and be Lord. Because in the act of consecration, you're moving something under the rule of Jesus and into his kingdom. Right? Things don't necessarily operate there. Things quite often operate way outside of his loving, intimate, invited rule and in his kingdom, right? So when Jesus tells us to pray, thy kingdom come, thy will be done, it's because his kingdom is not come and his will is not done often on earth as it is in heaven. He invites us to pray that it would be. So we bring our year under your rule and into your kingdom, Jesus. And then surrendering agendas, right? Like, this is the year we're getting to Paris. This is the year we're going to paint the house. This is the year where we're going to buy our first condo. This is whatever. Surrendering that and asking Jesus, come and be the operating Lord of our year.
Yeah, it's really good, John. And one of the questions that comes up for me and for our listeners is, and then how would you stay in it? What is it that you do to let it continue to be this fuel, this guiding, this lens? And just by way of confession, so one year, rather recently, we sat down as a lovely little family of 4 and heard a word and wrote it on these little ornaments that we hung on the tree, and it was beautiful. And then the next year, when we unpacked our ornaments, I found the 4 ornaments, and I went, what the heck are these? And I start reading them, and it took a while, and I went, oh, these were those words from God. Like, I didn't even remember them.
Yes.
And we committed to praying for each other about them.
Yes.
And it just never happened. And so for us, what we had to do, and we do now regularly, is in the mud room, which is the path that everyone walks through the garage into the kitchen multiple times a day. We took our words, all 4 of us, and put them on a sticky note. And so we see them every day. So last year, I saw words from God for 365 days. And what's so beautiful is it's just a kind remembering. It's not buried in a journal and then the shame of 3 months go by, but it's actually ordering our days.
Now, what do you mean by words? Because I don't think we've explained that yet. What are these words?
Yeah. So an example, like some years, God might give like a scripture where it's just a guiding, kind of an orientation.
Okay.
That whatever else he's doing, this is a lens by which he wants me to be thinking about things. So, one year he gave me the parable of the 10 women and the lamps and the lamp oil, right? So
give me oil in my lamp.
yeah, he didn't sing that song, but it was related to
Keep
that
me
parable.
burning, burning.
But so it's just lamp oil, right? And so that was the word for me that kind of embodied the message of there's something in this parable that's important to God in my growing this year. I have no idea what it is, but the story intrigues me. There's all kinds of mystery. Everyone interprets it with different pieces. And so I just wrote lamp oil, right? One year, my son, it was courage. It was, you're going to need courage for what's ahead. And so it's to pray for courage. And so sometimes it's a word, sometimes it's a story, sometimes it's something that represents what's on the frontier of our growth. And it takes all different forms, but it's something that's very tangible as an access point. And so it's something we could write on a sticky note and put it right in front of us.
Yeah,
and
that's good.
And that way it's something we can return to easily.
So as you're consecrating your year as an individual or as a group, what we recommend is that you ask Jesus for a word or a scripture or some words over the entire year.
Yeah.
Like, do you have a theme for this year, Lord? Do you have a word of promise? Do you have a word of counsel? And some friends had been living in a really tough place financially, and the word that they heard over their year was abundance. And it was really hard to believe it. It was really hard to trust it. But they wrote it down on a sticky and put it on the bathroom mirror and prayed into it and asked for it and built towards it. And like, okay, this is a year of abundance. We're gonna pray for it. We're gonna believe it. We're gonna receive it. So it might be a word. It might be a theme. I had a really unusual experience in 2019. First, I didn't hear from God through most of January. Kind of got through most of January before I got some clarity. So there's mercy in that. But when I finally did get clarity, I think part of the reason that I couldn't get clarity is I was looking for one word over the year. And Jesus said, actually, your year has 3 sections to it, 3 parts. Like, really? Okay, what's the first part? He said, first part of the year, the word is very carefully. And I'll get back to what that ended up meaning. But I'm like, okay, I wrote it down very carefully. Second, third of the year, Lord, kind of the summer months. What's May, June, July, August? What's that? And he said, deep Shabbat. And I love it that he spoke to me in Hebrew, deep Shabbat, Sabbath. You're going to need some deep Sabbath somewhere in those months. I'm like, okay, I can plan for that. If that's my instruction, that's the word, I can arrange for it, And then the third, and he said, he was just kind of quiet on the third, and I just had the sense of, that's not for now. I'll know it when I get there. But that was new. I'd never had a year broken into parts before, but each part had a word, and very carefully, there were some things that happened in the first 4 months of the year that required us living very carefully and not sloppily. Particularly, don't react to things. Don't react to that family news. Don't react to that family request. And so it was very orienting. It was like, John, you want to shoot from the hip right now, don't shoot from the hip. You want to fly by the seat of your pants, don't fly by the seat of your pants. Very carefully. And it actually ended up being a rescue. It really did. It was good counsel. And then getting into the second part, holy moly, did I need deep Shabbat. I needed some episodes of genuine rest in that second part of the second third of the year. And it was really good because I don't think I'd have planned for it if he hadn't said so. So over the years, consecrating the year and asking Jesus for guidance over it. And you understand that the spirit of this, folks, is making Christ Lord of your calendar, letting him orchestrate your days by invitation, not by interruption. Right? You don't want to force God to intervene in your madness. You want to pray over the madness before it becomes madness and ask his daily active shepherding of, you can tell us anything, Jesus. If you want us to move, we'll move. If you don't want us to move, we won't move. We'll surrender those plans. We really want to get to, see Alaska this year or something. But Jesus, you can say no, and you can guide us, and you can also guide us on the timing of that. And that happened last year as well. Stacy and I did take some vacation, and we thought it would be in August. And he said, no, take it in June. I'm like, June? No, the weather's better in August. He's like, June. And June ended up being perfect for it. So letting him be the operating Lord of your calendar, right?
John, what I appreciate as I'm listening to you is what I observe is the progression of how you've walked in this over the years, because what you just described was a pretty deep consent. In other words, a deep belief that God will speak, that his words will inform me. They very likely will not be what I expect to hear, but whatever they are, they're life. And so I will allow them to have say.
Yes.
And it's interesting because I think of like in the earliest years of this, so much of the conversation was about how much it was like disruptive, right? Where it's like, there was a year where you were talking about my love, right?
Yes.
One year was my love.
Yes.
And that was a word that
Yes.
you had shared. Like it was almost like this stark contrast to what you thought you should do or what you thought you should pray or how you thought you should operate.
Yes.
But it was like, okay, God, I know you spoke.
Yes.
But there was like almost even a little contention. And what I so appreciate seeing in your life is that we grow to become the kind of person that really believes he wills what is good for us. And so it's actually like it's life-saving.
Yes.
Because you know that there's goodness. And so it's often counterintuitive, but it's life. And so you kind of put down the gloves a little bit and go, God, I know that I'm a son and I'm a student and you have my best intentions at the center of your heart. And so like, this is really good news.
Yeah.
But I love seeing how it's progressed over the years.
Yeah. Was there something in 2019 that was helpful for you? I mean, you guys.
Well, what I noticed was
you do this.
Yeah, I do it. And what I noticed was those years where like, I'd stumble and bumble 6 months through. I'm like, what was that word again? Okay, I need to go back to my journal. I need to get back to that. It was like, it was a bit disjointed to me, where it was almost like kind of total pie in the sky, like, Jesus, what's the theme now? And I would just kind of listen to a word, almost like banking on fully on revelation. But what I've come to see is that it's all an ongoing process of maturity, of ongoing process of initiation, of maturation and wholeheartedness. And so I've noticed over the last several years, they build on each other. Like the themes are not disjointed, but there is a narrative that looking back, I see God working. And so that's really fun. It's almost like now I look towards December and January as almost this promotion, where at some level I sense God saying, well done, son. And now that we've gone through that, let's go to the next thing. And so there was a lot of deep work for me. This was a particular year of facing some really deep work in crucifying the false self and putting to death a lot of just the deep self-saving, self-sufficiency, the things that have worked for me for so many years but are no longer serving me. So I did some deep trauma work. I took some big risks, and it was really fruitful. And actually, December 1st was a huge kind of, it marked a bottom for me in 2018.
Yes,
so,
I remember that.
Yep. So that really began a year. So for me, the spiritual calendar is a little bit off of the actual physical calendar.
The new year began December 2nd.
It really did. Yeah. It was really fun because my year is now ordered much more around what God is doing in my life and the seasons of my spiritual life than the calendar. And so it was a celebration this year at December 1st, 2019. And I felt like the Father really wanted to celebrate a promotion and just bask in it. And again, enjoy the transition. And then it was almost like he said, now in light of that, here's some things we're going to work on. And it was some deep stuff because I knew it was just frontier. It was this idea, and fundamentally it's the idea of that which exists between our load and our limit, the true sense of margin, of I live at capacity.
Yes, most people do.
Right? I live at capacity. I used to live
Or
far
well
beyond
it.
capacity.
Yeah,
right?
well beyond it. Yeah.
Now I live closer to capacity. The problem is God has many things in store that I'm not aware of.
Yes.
And those all bump me over capacity because I want to say yes to God.
Yes.
But the challenge is I've said yes to all these other things that I thought were from God, but simply were good things that weren't intended by God. And so he's now inviting me out of the work that he did in 2019 to take some big risks, to say, now you're ready to revisit, this ancient category, but a way of living in the kingdom where we're really honest about load and limit, and a way so that I'm actually readied for the unexpected, to expect the unexpected, because God has things in store that he's promised me I'm not aware of.
Yeah.
And so it's just a shift, but the idea is the words for each year are becoming less and less disjointed, and I'm seeing them as a narrative for my initiation.
Yes, right. There is a tapestry that's being woven over time. Yeah.
So John, before we close, back to words, you had put to words that you had the word for the first part of your year and the word for the second part of the year. But that third part, you sensed that God was saying, just wait.
Yes.
Just wait.
Yes.
Was there more that unfolded
Well,
for you?
and I saw his kindness in waiting. So the third, once I got to deep Shabbat, my soul was in a place to be able to hear because
Fascinating.
what he wanted to say to me about the third part of the year was, he said, my kingdom. And the fall was incredible. We had a ton of kingdom and a ton of mission and advancing the kingdom in the world and the launch of some really huge stuff. But I couldn't have heard that. If he'd have told me that before Deep Shabbat, I would have just been crushed by it. It's like, what? More mission? Uncle. So that was really kind. And I didn't know it till I got there. And then I almost even forgot to ask. But when I, kind of entered into the fall season here, and I'm like, oh yeah, so what orient me for this last piece? And he said, oh, it's my kingdom. I'm like, yeah, far out. Let's advance the kingdom. It was in a place that I wanted to.
Yes.
Right.
John, that's so good because it reminds us that there's nothing magic per se about the year, right? We are on time with God, and there's
Yes.
something that's portioned out. He
Yes.
parcels out
Yes.
heaven, Ephesians says. So there's a parceling out. There's a portion that's good and true for our soul at this time. And so I think that's good to be reminded of, God, what do you want to say now? Right? What do you want to speak to, and what portion? And to just even be curious about that.
Yeah, exactly. So don't force it, friends, no pressure, but as you allow for transition between Christmas and New Year's, between 2019 and 2020, reflect, rest, sing a few carols, read the Christmas story again, and then as you look at 2020 and hang a new calendar, consecrate it.
Yeah.
Consecrate your year. Invite Jesus to be the intimate Lord of it. Ask for words and then give it time. They may come in that moment. They may not come for weeks. That's okay. Take the pressure off and just say, Jesus, come and guide us in this new year. And that feels like more than enough for this week's Transition Podcast. You've been listening to John Eldridge Morgan Snyder here on the Ransomed Heart Podcast.